Good evening, everyone. I call this meeting of the Policy and Legislative Committee to order. Please call the roll.
Chairman Smith? Policy Committee Chairwoman Ms. Haddon?
Here.
Ms. Black? Mr. Connor?
Here.
Mr. Daugherty?
Here.
Mr. Groen?
Here.
Ms. Jones? Mr. King?
Here.
Ms. Schaefer?
Here.
Mr. Slater?
Here.
Ms. Thomas?
To guide our work tonight, we will be reviewing 3 sets of policy items. Second quarter review, first read policies, personnel policies submitted on the November board agenda. Our task is to consider any adjustments before these move forward for second and final read on the December 18th board agenda. Next, we will review policy 1.400, school board meetings, which was originally scheduled for a second and final read in November and was referred to this committee for further discussion. Finally, we will discuss 2 new redlined policies that board members requested be reviewed for possible first read in December and second final read in January. Before we begin, I would like to adjust tonight's agenda. Specifically in section 4.1, I would like to replace policy 4.304, high school athletics, with policy 1.300, committees of the board. This corrected version is in your printed packets. Okay. I would also like to add policy 5.1042, educator diversity. If there is no objection, the agenda will be amended as stated.
I'm sorry, on the 4.304, what took its place?
Policy 1.300, which is committees of the board.
Okay, thank you.
Hearing no objection, the agenda is amended. At the conclusion of the policy section, I will turn the meeting over to our legislative chair, Mrs. Schaefer, to lead sections 4 through 8. A side note, I do have to leave right at 6:30, so for an important other engagement. So we will now begin with the second quarter review items. I would like to ask Mrs. Moody and Mrs. Murray to walk us through the proposed revisions for each personnel policy.
Good evening. We'll start with the first policy, which is 5.100, goals for personnel. The addition in number 6 is to clarify educator diversity and considering diversity of students as well. So that's at the board discretion.
Ms. Schaefer?
I don't see any legal citation there. So there's no legal reason, right, Mary, to have to add that?
It's not there pursuant to any specific statute or anything like that. But it does note that it would only be implemented in a manner consistent with the state and federal laws, but none are specifically cited to.
I don't see any reason to make this change.
In the previous one, the wording's a little different. It just says ensures diversity and now supports diversity with addition with the last sentence added.
The previous actually says to develop and implement a minority recruitment program that ensures diversity within the Hamilton County Department of Education.
From ensures to supports.
I would just want some advice from Mary as to legally where we are with the federal and the Tennessee rules on the diversity issues. My concern is that this runs afoul of kind of the public policy where we're headed.
Yeah, well, as the board may recall, the requirement that there be, and of course, this isn't the diversity policy, but the requirement that there be one for as far as the state's concerned, no longer exists. But you know, I'm not sure that, I mean, I don't think that on its face, this language, particularly given that it takes into account that it will be implemented in a manner consistent with any applicable state and federal laws, that it is, I don't think it necessarily runs afoul of anything, but it's certainly at the board's discretion whether or not the board would like it to be there.
Mr. Grown?
Thank you, ma'am. The old wording where I'm concerned about ensures. I mean, as much as we try to make sure that we have a diverse professional staff in terms of our in-classroom teachers, we found that that's extremely hard to accomplish. So why would we have that particular word in there, ensure? I mean, we can try.
Well, it was changed, it was actually changed from ensure to supports.
Yeah, well, as long as that ensures is out of there, I'm fine with this.
Do you want to proceed with the next one?
Okay, great. The next one is 5.101, which is creation of positions and lines of authority. The only change there is to add via a grievance procedure at the bottom. So it's just to clarify some wording. Okay. The next one, 5.102, classification and qualifications. It is just changing the word teacher to professional employee. And on the second page, it's just changing from Hamilton County Schools to Hamilton County Department of Education. We're just trying to be consistent throughout.
Okay, and may I ask a question real
Sure.
quickly? There was something in reviewing these policies where I noticed when we monitor these policies, and I wonder if we might need to revise while we're doing this when we're supposed to be monitoring, because
Good point, since we've changed to the quarterly. Mary, I'm just going to ask a little bit of legal advice here. Can we change, since we're now reviewing things on a quarterly basis, can we change the dates on when we review these to the quarterly without needing to bring them all to the board, or do we need to bring them all to the board with the revised date?
That's a great question.
I'm okay to defer and wait on that one too, but we can do them for
Let me,
these.
and Scott's here, well, he's not here, but he's here, he hears somewhat, and I don't, he may have a thought.
Hey, buddy.
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, so fundamentally, the policies belong to the board, and so really, it's up to the board to decide how often you want to review. So you could insert there in the review date, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. You could insert months. That's completely up to you, as long as we have a systematic approach. I would say that doing it quarterly sometimes results practically in we're reviewing a lot of policies all at once, and that can be kind of burdensome. So there's a practical side to this too. Beyond that, that's totally up to you all. Mary and I don't have a legal opinion on this.
Oh, Mr. Bennett, I'm sorry. I think my question was, can we revise the date without it coming to the board? Is that an administrative piece that can be revised if they decide on quarterly, or do we have to bring them all back to the board with that revision?
Maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying.
Um,
Can you
where it
Go
says revised, right? Like we've built our quarterly schedule. So when instead it's saying 3/13/25, if we change that to match quarter two on our quarterly schedule, do I have to bring every policy to the board with that change, or is that an administrative change that we can just change it to quarterly when we post them
Oh,
online?
literally all you're doing is changing the review dates.
Yes.
Then I think that's just an administrative notation.
Okay.
But, I mean, I do, if I'm understanding your question, I apologize that I,
No problem.
yeah, I don't have the hot link here to the actual policies y'all are looking at, so I'm a little bit in the dark, I'm sorry.
Okay, that sounds good. And I was thinking maybe we could just put annually, because this is once a year, as we do the other changes, and just replace annually instead of naming the month. Okay. Mr. Connor?
Thank you, Chair. Shannon, if you want to bring the dates that you want to change all these, I'll make a motion in the next meeting to approve all of the dates in one swath. And then we've done both. We've voted and acknowledged them.
Okay, great. So the next policy is 5.1021, and it's military professionals. And simply the changes here are to clarify Hamilton County Department of Education and then JROTC inside director, and change superintendent to director of schools. Again, consistency. Okay. The next one is 5.1041 for ADA. And these are clarifications in regards to essential job functions, alternative reasonable accommodations, et cetera. And of course, Mary and Scott have both vetted all the legal changes. All right, the next one that we have here, let's see, recruitment of employees. It's just some word clarification, employment shall be, and then inserting qualified and diverse. And so that's board policy 5.105. Okay. 5.1061.
Excuse
Oh,
me,
sorry,
can we-
yes.
I'm just not sure if we need, it's in other places too, effort shall be made to ensure the recruitment of a diverse force. Can we just say qualified? I mean, do we have to ensure that? Or, I mean, I believe in diversity, and it's in some of the other policies as well. And the other one on goals for human resources, so
Okay.
I don't know that we have to make that statement. Because I like the word supports. I like supports diverse workforce, but to ensure it, and that means that we're having to change strategies and maybe, just change strategies in order to make sure, someone's maybe hired because of the diversity or whatever over someone else if we're ensuring it. But I like the word supports, or maybe support instead of ensure there again. I mean, that's just my
Wonder if you
opinion.
just change it to effort shall be made to recruit a qualified and diverse workforce.
I like that.
Okay, but I'm not sure about the word ensure. Can we
No.
say
Yeah,
support
it
like
would-
we did
just
the
No,
other?
he took it out.
He took it
Oh,
out.
you took the whole thing out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I took, just change it to
Okay.
effort shall be made to recruit
Recruit.
a qualified and diverse workforce.
I think that should be it.
I make the suggestion, for Penny to think about, it's just something to think about. One of the words that, we all recognize that we can do is pursue. So efforts shall be made to pursue.
I
not
like that
ensure.
word.
But pursue is one of those words that courts recognize we have the right. It's a consideration, it's not a dictate. We
Yeah,
pursue
ensure sounds more
ensure.
like a dictate, but supporting, because I believe in it. But as, I just, I like that word. It's pursue. Can we change it to pursue?
Sure.
And
So.
we can say qualified and diverse workforce.
So I've made the notation for effort shall be made to pursue the recruitment of a qualified and diverse workforce.
That's great. That
Okay.
sounds perfect to me.
Great. Okay, the next one, criminal records check, 5.1061. Again, those are just clarifications for the titles for consistency's sake. And then we also inserted entry or guilty plea in number 3.
Yeah. Okay. Ms. Schaefer?
This is kind of piggybacks on this one, but I've been talking to Dr. Brown this week about volunteer policies and the background checks on those. So I'd like, I know it's not before us tonight, but it's just as important for the volunteers. Dr. Brown, do you want to say anything to that?
Yes, ma'am. I believe you, let me pull up the numbers so that we're real quick. I think you were referring to our volunteer policy. I believe it's in section 6, so it's not 5. So I believe you wanted us to take a look. In our policy, we state that the parameters to be a volunteer in our schools, and the distinction there is if a volunteer is going to be left alone with one of our students, then they must go through a background check, be approved. But there is a gray area there where principals have some autonomy into allowing someone to be in our schools where they're not going to be left alone with the student. They're not going to be asked to supervise. That they would not have to go through the background check. We use that almost as a guest policy. So, give me an example. If every year through our elementary schools we have encouraging reading across the schools. Sometimes once a year you'll have someone to go into a school. They're going to be with the classroom teacher. They're going to be in the room maybe 15, 20 minutes, read a book to the students, and they're out. So right now, as it currently states, as long as the principal knows who's going to be in the building and there's no concerns, that person would not have to go through a background check. They're allowed to check in, be with the classroom teacher, do the guest reading, so to speak. That might be it. And do the guest speaking, but then not. But again, there is this idea of what if that same person wanted to come back the next month, or what if there's 2 or 3 days, and then where does this board want to draw the line? That do we want all volunteers to be background checked? Is there some other things we want to consider? So my suggestion would be that we'll pull up that board policy and bring that to the board so we can revisit and make sure it's to a place that the board agrees. And I believe that policy is going to be.
Jody, do you know what policy number that is by chance?
I think it's 4.501.
There you go. That's the one. That's the one. That's exactly.
Does that include volunteers, though? That's just visitors to the schools.
It's 4.501 is school volunteers.
There you go.
And I think that what we're trying to get at is, and we've got to be careful here. So this came out of about 10 years ago, a previous incident, and Mary can speak to it. We don't want to be so restrictive that a parent that is coming in to work a holiday party once a year and not alone with kids isn't having to get a background check. But again, to Dr. Brown's point, if someone is coming in on give you an example, say someone's coming in to do pitching lessons for the baseball team and they're going to be there 8 times during the season, that is different than a person coming in to volunteer on 1 or 2 occasions through the year. So some legal words about the repetition or that's where we would want to get it.
We just need to tailor it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because you're giving like 1 or 2 versus 8, but we've got 3 and 4 situation. And that's what I want to make sure that we narrow down in.
I think it's like a regularly scheduled purpose or something like that. That's different than a parent that's coming in from time to time. If someone's coming in on a regularly scheduled, volunteer, that to me becomes more than just someone coming in to volunteer once or twice.
So are we on the same page in this incident?
I believe we are.
Okay, thank you.
My question would be, we do have some organizations that come in on a regular basis.
Right, and those, we've been pretty
nonprofits,
pretty strict
religious
about
groups.
those background checked. I think that where the distinction is coming is you know, someone that's not just coming once or twice to volunteer, but is being scheduled multiple times and it's planned, I think that's what we're talking about.
Okay, Mr. Daughtery?
Thank you. To be clear, this is predicated on a state law requirement, if I remember correctly. And this is something that we've had as a board policy for many years, right?
It is, but again, what separates here and where it gets sticky is and I would look to Mary on this and Scott, but the state law is when someone is supervising kids.
One to one compared to, like, use the example Grandparents' Day. We had Grandparents' Day up at Thrasher.
They're not alone with kids.
They're not alone with kids.
supervising them.
They're right.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad we're talking about this. I know it's not on the agenda tonight, but two things that I just want to seeds I want to plant is uniformity of application across the schools. Even in my own district, with probably the lowest number of schools, there's disparity in the way it's being administered in certain situations. And I've gotten a couple emails from parents. So that's one thing. The other thing too, and this is a larger conversation, but I would like to talk about it, is we talk about community engagement, more so parental engagement. And I think we all would agree that that's probably one of the biggest drivers for success of a school, right? Do you have good community engagement? Do you have parental engagement? This to me is one where I wish we could get creative in terms of better facilitating it, more so in maybe the lower economically disadvantaged areas, because there is a cost to that, to do that whole process, the fingerprinting, the background. I can't remember how much it was. But I'm not saying that's a barrier, but that's an obstacle for some of our families across Hamilton County. So I would love to get that ball rolling in terms of a conversation. Maybe it's a nonprofit that can step in, because if you've got a family or a parent that wants to be involved, but maybe they don't have the means to do it, it just seems a little counter to our mission, right? Just a thought. But I'm glad we're talking about that, because this is something that I've been in my heart for a little bit. Thank you.
Mr. King?
Yeah. And a lot of times it's more so grandparents even than parents that have the time to come and do it. And they're also sometimes financially challenged, so that is good if we can figure out how to help.
Yeah, I don't know what it looks like, but
I think we're on the same page of trying to work through this. What we're trying to allow some flexibility, and it's the first paragraph that I think gets to what we're saying is all volunteers wishing to serve, blah, blah, but it's this part, the last sentence here, any such volunteer having unmonitored contact with children must first undergo a background check. I think the second piece of this is if we are consistently even if it's unmonitored, if there is a scheduled multiple contacts, that is different than what you're saying of like a parent that wants to come in and
read a book. Or
that's right. That's right.
Have lunch. Something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Schaefer?
The concept here is foreseeable risk. Is there a foreseeable risk that this person could be around children unsupervised and harm a child? So we have to close up those foreseeabilities and making sure that we have done our due diligence, that all of these scheduled events, those people are checked. We know what we're dealing with, because it does create a liability issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's an absolute balance. I'm not discrediting that at all. I'm just, how do you, yeah, I'm with you. There's a balance for sure.
Any other questions or comments? Okay.
I just have one clarification for you all. Section 4 is our next quarterly review, and so we would be bringing first reads in February under our current structure and then voting on a change in March. Is that fine for us to do this during that quarterly section, or is this something we want to push to January with a vote in February and bump it up a month?
I would like to see it sooner.
Same here.
Okay, thank you.
And we do want to clarify that for the volunteer process, that once they are fingerprinted, that is good for 3 years, as long as there's no lapse. Okay, great. So our next board policy is 5.107, classified employees. And it's just simply clarification at the bottom that if an employee is demoted or terminated, they'll receive written notice. And then an insertion of source at the top. Okay. 5.114, personnel records and employee references. And item number 7, clarification for the law that the public does not have the ability to attain someone's emergency contact information. Okay. The next one, employee demographic changes. It's simply the insertion of employees. And then 5.200, it's the removal, according to updates to the law, that the director does not have the same appeals rights. Mary, did you have anything to add? This is for 5.200, suspension.
I think that change, I'm trying to remember. I think we deleted that sentence, I thought, because it was elsewhere in the policy, and so it was duplicative. I could be wrong about
Yes,
that.
it's also on page 3, that they have their right to appeal. So it
Yeah,
was,
so it was just
Yes.
getting rid of the duplicative language, and, yeah, then changing superintendent to director for consistency. Yeah.
okay. Board policy 5.203, non-renewal. It's really updating this to current times, and that we won't necessarily send these out via hand delivery or registered mail anymore, but rather utilizing email.
Okay, Ms. Schaefer?
Why would we give such a big notice without true process of service here? Help me understand why we're doing email and not mail with return receipt.
That changed, the law changed a few years ago, I think, and so it also allows for sending via the mail still, but it gave us the option of email, which I think in many ways HR can speak as maybe a little bit of, gives us a little more assurance.
We can track that.
Can you do a read receipt at least?
We
Can we put in there read
absolutely.
receipt?
That's what I
Sure.
was just gonna say.
Yeah.
I wasn't comfortable with that as a legal notice.
So many of the registered mails that we send out are never.
And I
picked
get
up.
that.
Yeah.
Trust me.
I know you know, yes.
But the read receipt would help.
Okay, we can do that. Okay, great, thank you. Board policy 5.204, resignation. It's simply just adding the footnote to line 17 to reference 49.5411. And then also for consistency's sake, changing from superintendent to director of schools. Okay. For 5.205, we talked about this at the last board meeting, and the board was very supportive of the changes that we're looking at moving forward to retirement. And of course, this includes clarifying both the hybrid and the legacy plans for TCRS, and also clarifying health insurance eligibility when our retirees go on to finish their service. So again, that is changing that to, if you're certified, you should have had 20 years of service with Hamilton County Schools and classified 15 years, the last 5 to be consecutive, and you must also meet the retirement eligibility for which plan you're on. I also added in language in regards to retirement disability coverage, because from time to time we do have folks who have to retire due to illness and disability who still require coverage, and so it clarifies what the terms and conditions are for it, as well as Medicare disability. And then we also further confirm the rates and eligibility. I also have a separate packet. The board reviewed and approved it in the last meeting, but we promised that we would bring it back tonight. So if it's okay, I'll pass it out for you.
That's fine.
Thank you.
And this is about the retirement, new
Yes, ma'am.
retirement policy that you just discussed last board meeting, right?
Yes.
Thank you for this.
Hey,
And I just wanted to allow some time for discussion to make sure everyone understands what we're doing going forward. I've had a couple of employees inquire as to, are we offering a retirement incentive? No, that's not what this is. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands it and is familiar with it and has time to review it. So this document, I did make a few red line changes from the last one that was presented to the board. Page 4, you'll see we added in when folks retire with dependents, we are going to request or proposing that the board request that that dependent be covered for at least 12 months. What we've seen in the past is folks will have their spouse retire the week before they do, add them to our plan, and then retire.
So they've got to be on plan now for a year prior.
Now for a year.
Okay.
Okay. And then I clarified that also on page 6. And then page 7, I clarified that once they move to Medicare, they can't then come back on our plan either.
Does that happen?
No, not typically, because at 65, they've moved on to the other plan, but just wanted to clarify that in case we have that question. And then I did add some clarifications around Medicare eligibility and how that process works and what month they're eligible, so there's no question.
And what page is that?
That is page 12. And those are all federal requirements. And so I know Scott had some concerns about us referencing age 65. Mary and I have talked about that, and those are simply, federal requirements for Medicare. That is, of course, subject to change, but currently that is the age, and so that's what we monitor and reference. So when folks turn 65, they do roll off of our plan, just as their dependents when they turn 26.
Scott wasn't comfortable with 65?
Scott, do you want to weigh in?
Yes, so when we drafted this initially, back in the day, we were trying to avoid specific language about age eligibility, because there's an argument that it triggers some ADEA issues. But if our broker's fine with this, I can't argue with it. It's just, I think I put in my official email that I had the heebie-jeebies about age being a disqualifier, because it's just, as an employment lawyer, that's so ingrained in me for that not to be a disqualifier. But Penny's right. It's Medicare eligibility. I just figured that you didn't need to say both. You could say Medicare eligibility whenever eligible, because if you think about it, you could be eligible at 65, or you could be eligible earlier if there's a disability.
Yeah.
I
I agree with
could be a
Scott.
worrywart.
Okay. And we can make those tweaks.
Yeah.
I was about to say I could be a worrywart, but if Ms. Schaefer agrees with me, then it's a brilliant idea.
You're always brilliant, Scott.
So I'll make those adjustments, and I believe I'm going to put this back on the board agenda for January so that it allows time for review, and anyone who has questions, we're happy to answer those, so there's no concerns when we finally pass it. Does that work?
Penny, last question, sorry, please.
No, absolutely.
So hypothetically speaking, it's on the agenda in January, we take it to a vote, passes. When would that go into effect, these changes? Does it?
It says on the front.
So July 1, 2026.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Oh, my bad, sorry. I see it.
Absolutely. All right, thank you. Okay, the next board policy is 5.602, time schedules and extra duty. This is a clarification, and we actually talked through it during collaborative conferencing. It's just to clarify the teacher work day so that there's no questions. Okay, and then board policy.
Excuse us
sorry.
for a second.
So I'm not sure if different schools do different things, but what is the number of hours that you can request from a teacher to do outside the school day service? Is there a cutoff, like, is it 30 hour? And I know it's supposed to be equitable,
It's equitable duty.
so there's not a cutoff.
Teachers are exempt employees, so, they're not bound by wage and hour overtime, so.
So you're telling me now that if a administrator can't get people to cover the gates at a football game, that I guess he could ask teachers to do that, but then they could turn around and say no and not have to do it? Or is that still part of, so,
I think best practice, and there's principal administrators that do things differently, but I can just go back to my days of being a principal. I think it's early on, you always want your staff to know exactly when it comes to safety and security about what's expected out of you. And so, and I believe many principals continue to do this. At the beginning of the year, we go ahead and lay out, or really actually every semester, right? When three sports seasons, you have fall, winter, and spring. At the beginning of those seasons, you go ahead and lay out, equitable duty. Well, we have so many games, we're going to need so many spots, so everyone needs to sign up for 3. And so in theory, I would always have a sign-up sheet, whatever it might be, allow people to have some flexibility, what works with their schedule. But all in all, we want to be careful of, we don't want to work teachers every day, but we got to make sure that everything's covered. So it's about how you go about setting the schedule, make sure teachers know ahead of time when they're going to be expected. But different location, it might be 4 duties, but it might be 3. So it's just best practice to make sure that things are covered. But what we want is to make sure that our employees are given enough time so they can plan accordingly. And that's for our certified, our professional employees.
Or recruit parents.
And I know one
That's right.
point of disagreement or disgruntling sometimes is bus duty, when teachers have to do a lot of bus duty. But it seems like in the hours that they have to be there, it seems like 7.5, but it includes the 30-minute lunch. So it's almost like they have that 30 extra minutes where they can work, because they're actually working 7 hours and not 7.5. Is that right? I mean,
The typical school day is 7 hours. They have 30-minute duty-free lunch in the middle of it. And then, what it says is 15 minutes before the start of the day and
Right.
15 minutes at the
Right,
end.
right.
The vast majority of responsibilities will be done in that time, but some car lines go a little bit longer, so you do have equitable duty of where some teachers stay this week, some will stay the next week. We've gotten pretty good in PECO dealing with this with HCEA and don't have a lot of issues anymore. I can't
and
say.
I haven't heard any complaints this
Right.
year.
I have. And it's the magnet transportation buses that,
They're
because
late.
we have 2 waves, and they're having to stay past their 15 minutes after school. And so I know we need to tighten that up a little bit.
All right, thank you. Okay, and the final policy under personnel is 5.702, student teachers. And it is inserting agree to host, because it's important that the sponsoring teacher want to host a student teacher. And then also ensure that they have evaluations that they are above expectations or significantly above expectations to host a student teacher. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Unless there's no objection, these personnel policies will move forward to the December board agenda for second and final read with some of the corrections or changes that we made, correct? Okay. So hearing no objection, we'll move to the next item. If a member does object, then we will need to, I guess no one's objected, okay. Thank you to Shannon for all your help in this preparation for this meeting. We now move to the item referred to committee from the November meeting. I would like to ask Mrs. Moody to give us an overview of the adjustments to policy 1.400.
Thank you. So in your packet, you guys have 1.400. We discussed this at the last policy committee meeting. It has been to the board for a first read. We reviewed it or sent it to committee in last meeting to discuss it further. And so the adjustment to this, you'll notice, is under regular meetings. This is making a proposal to separate the dates for the work session and the business meeting. So this includes a work session beginning at 6 sometime that week. Typically, in the past, we have done it on Mondays, but it doesn't designate that. Sometime that week to review the agenda, to give you all time to actually go over the agenda that we've been trying to do right before the work session. Then a separate day, which we usually have is Thursdays, right? This will be the voting meeting, that you actually come with that agenda, any adjustments or clarifications you've gotten from the first day. That's where you'll hear public comment in connection to the voting meeting, and then be able to do the voting meeting. So it's separating those. My suggestion here to think about is if we do that, then you can keep this 4:30 time that you've kind of held on your schedules and allow for committee meetings to be during those 4:30 times. And so we can actually, I think, get some consistency around how many times we're meeting during the month, to be able to streamline that on the 2 days leading up to the board meetings. Of course, the 4:30 is harder for people to get to. That would be the committee meetings, that would be the like optional for the board, and then the 6 o'clock meetings are the work sessions to work through things. That's the thinking behind this. Definitely, you guys referred it to committee to discuss it, so turn it back over to
Okay,
you.
well, Mr. Slater, would you like to comment?
Okay, this would be on the December meeting.
It would be, so it would go into place in January if we
Okay.
decided to do that. Or we could put a restriction on it.
Okay, as someone who travels 50 minutes to an hour to get here, according to what the traffic may be, I'm afraid I can't support this policy change.
Jill? I mean, Ms. Black, sorry.
I know that we changed this policy right when I rolled onto the board, so I've never experienced like 2 separate days for the working group. I do like the idea of having committee meetings at the 4:30 slot if we're going to move the working session. The only thing that concerns me is I want to ensure that we hear public comment before we vote on anything. I think we have some friends in other parts of the state that hear public comment at the end of a meeting, which doesn't really, seems antithetical, doesn't it? Like, it doesn't, I would like to hear from constituents and stakeholders before we vote. So as long as we keep the order of hearing public comment at the beginning of the meeting, whenever it is, that's what I would prefer.
Mr. King?
Just
Yeah.
may I comment?
Go ahead, Scott.
To Ms. Black's comment, the one thing that the law requires us to do is we have to have public comment at a meeting where we're going to take action. So if we're going to vote, we have to have public comment. The original rationale for having public comment at the work session was to give the administration time to say, oh, you know what, that's a good point, and then go and address whatever concern may have been raised in the interim before the business session, so that the board would be well informed. If someone had raised a topic that was new to the discussion, if you do separate your work session night from your business meeting night, you may have comment at the work session night if you choose, but you must have comment before the voting session.
Okay.
That-
Mr. Groan?
That's what I was going to say.
Sorry. It doesn't have to be, Scott, I want to be clear on your words. It doesn't have to be before the vote. It just has to be on the same night. Legally.
Yeah, that's correct. You're
Okay.
right. And I was saying before, because that's how we have done it.
Right.
In the last 15 years, I remember forever ago, we did used to have public comment at the very, very, very end of the meeting, and it went on forever. I don't recommend that.
Thank you. And forgive me for stealing, but I will say I concur with Jill. I think that we need to make sure that we do have it before. I've part of my boardsmanship, sorry, not to like, yeah, look at me, but part of it, I reviewed a board that did that, and it was really awkward because they had literally voted on the stuff, and so everybody was just like, well, you don't care about me because you already voted on the thing I came to talk about, and so it was really awkward.
So you think separately? No,
Forgive
just
me.
make sure that we hear the public comment before we vote on any action.
As
Like
opposed to
before,
after, just in-
before we get to the voting matters.
Correct.
Okay.
That is my statement too.
You're also
I-
asking the public to come twice in that week too, because they're gonna show up on Thursday at 6 o'clock also, so you're asking the public to come twice.
The public speaking would be at the actual board meeting. I mean, they could come twice, for sure, but the agenda section is designed that you guys can work through the agenda and determine anything that you might need more clarification on before you get to a voting session, to give more time than just the sometimes 15 minutes you have in between.
That could take 20 minutes. So.
Okay.
I think part of it too is, this board has utilized committees more than any board that we've worked with, which I think is a good thing. And it's trying to bring also some consistency to when committees meet, is that now we would know, instead of, this Monday or that Tuesday, we've got the Monday, the third Monday and the third Thursday of every month that is set for committee meetings and for the agenda session and the voting session.
We could still do that, and
Yeah,
then
we
committee
absolutely
meetings are optional if, a board member can't drive an hour that night.
The other thing I would say about the public comment piece is sometimes when you do the agenda on Monday, that gives your constituents Monday to Thursday to kind of, because if they're engaged in the agenda process, you actually get some more feedback. We saw it in that structure before.
We'll get those emails. You don't have to worry about them, about the feedback.
Okay. Mr. Graham, did you have a comment?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. I think it's important that if we're going to have an agenda, first of all, there's always been an issue with us having a 4:30 meeting. And people just can't, for whatever reason, get here. And there could be a lot of reasons. I've never liked the idea that we do an agenda meeting. We've got, especially if it's a committee meeting, and we've got very particular items on an agenda meeting, but we're not allowing comment from the public. So I just see that as we need to have our constituents able to address an issue at a committee meeting. If we're going to take the time to schedule a committee meeting and we're going to be talking about very particular topics, that we should allow that. Now, if we keep them on the same day, do we open it up to allow comment before we actually dig in and start working at a work session? Because they've heard all of our comments, but are we okay with just hearing it before we actually vote? So in other words, leaving it the way it is, I don't think we're gaining any more credibility by setting up 2 different days to have meetings.
Okay. All right, Ms. Schaefer.
I would support having that day as a committee day, so that if a board member couldn't be here, it's still one of those optional days. But then having the 4:30 work session like it is now. Because also the board member could attend the committee via Zoom like we have to do sometimes. Because I know an hour drive, I have children events every night of the week. So, sometimes I'm sitting in my car outside of a child's event on the Zoom for a committee meeting. So I just think I would support that.
We don't have to take action on this. We can leave this in committee, continue to think about it. If we want to move committee meetings to the 3rd Monday, like, that doesn't require an action of the board. So if there's not a consensus on this, just leave it in the committee and don't bring it back in December.
Okay, and one other idea is if we know, as in this past fall, that there are a lot of people who want to get their comments in and aren't being heard, maybe we can schedule an extra session, maybe not a regular session, but an extra hearing session. Would either of you student representatives like to comment on that one? Do you have any comments? Okay. All right,
Excuse me, just to be clear, if we're going to have a 4:30 work, no matter what, if we're going to have a work session, and I don't know how we want to be specific about this, but if we set a meeting like this one, are we going to allow comment, public comment, prior to that meeting when the public knows we are talking about very specific issues, which tend to be topics that get more attention than normal?
and this is where maybe if they know what's on the agenda, since we post it, you know.
I
they'll
think,
sign
James,
up.
like, if we're not gonna take action, public comment stays where it's been, you know, for the past several years. To Ms. Haddon's point, any point that the board wants to call a listening session, if there is a very specific issue that we want to get feedback on, that's obviously the will of the board.
Well, I'm just saying that for me, if we've taken the trouble to set a committee meeting for whatever issue, I think that's going to mean that there's going to be a lot of public interest in this, because we feel we need more time than just our general meeting or our agenda session, our work session, to hash out an item. For example, we spent 3.5 years on cell phone policy. How many meetings did we have?
6.
Yeah. So that was a huge issue. And so it took us that long to get it, but without public input, and I don't mean getting bombarded with 700 or 800 emails that a lot of them say just the same thing and then just copy and paste it. I mean, actual topics like that, because I think the public needs to know that that's not productive.
Mr. King?
Yeah, and I think with us going to a uniform policy like what our county commission does has actually helped to, I don't know the right word.
Engage.
Well, it helps to engage the community, but it's not drawn out like our previous policy was. So I think by what we've adopted, you know, yes, there's still time, even at 4:30, there's time for them to talk beforehand, and it shouldn't take as long as a few of the times we had before we had adopted that policy.
So are we going to agree to just not
Table it?
put this in for, table this, basically?
Yeah, I think
or-
what I heard is leave it in committee, right? We will not submit it as a second final read in December, as long
Okay,
as
so
that's the
we
will of the
will
board.
leave this in committee. Okay, any other comments? Okay. All right, we have 2 red line policies that board members are requested for discussion. These are potential first read submissions in December. First, I would like to ask our student board member Ryan Jenkins to review the proposed adjustments to policy 3.210, naming new facilities.
Yeah, so I was really pleased with the outcome of this policy. Really just what I wanted to see was a process that would go with anytime you change any permanent aspect of a school, and in seeing that the community will be involved in that process, both current students and alumni as well, because I think, you know, community engagement is really a big value that we all hold, and I think that this would show that alumni, families, current students, anyone is always going to be attached to that school. So I think just having the policy, having this process in place and this policy is a big step in the right direction. And you'll see it on page 1 at number 6. It does avoid just using this as a policy to get caught up in all the little things. It's just focusing on the big pieces such as facilities, school identities, anything like that.
Yeah, that sounds really good, number 6, and will honor the mascot identity. So this policy looks really good. Does anyone else, Mr. Slater?
Yeah, one of the reasons this has come up is if a principal leaves after 3 years, the next principal can come in and change the mascot to school colors and change everything. So we wanted to have this in a policy that would keep that kind of thing from happening. That's the whole idea.
Mr. Brown?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Ms. Black?
This is just editing. I think there needs to be a closed parentheses on line 27 after identification. Is that where it's supposed to be?
Yeah, I'll have to read closely, but yes, I've got to edit something else on that line too, so, yep.
Okay, so this looks good as far as our submission for next month. You all think? Okay. Do you like it too, Star, as well? Okay. Good. All right, next I will ask Board Member Slater to review the proposed adjustments to policy 1.300, committees of the board.
Oh, I didn't know I was on the spot there. It's pretty self-explanatory. The Athletic Advisory Committee, we've been meeting for 4 months. And this is a vision statement, a mission statement from that committee to our committee. And I had some words, and I had Scott go over it to make sure it was all legal, and I think Scott's gone. But anyway, he helped me with some of the wording and stuff. So I just think this is a great idea for our schools and our facilities and our sports programs. And I think it should be included in policy.
I think it's a great idea, and it looks really well written. And so would this come for a first read for December? Is that?
Yeah, I think this committee just determines if we send it as a first read, which
Okay.
if there's no objections, then we work like we would.
Okay, Ms. Schaefer?
I just want to commend you on the final statement on 24 and 25 about staffing. Coaches should have proper training, experience, leadership abilities, and the correct number of coaches that are needed for every sport. I like that, Steve. Good job.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve, Mr. Slater, Steve, for the work you've done on this athletic committees.
We've got some other things coming too, by the way. We'll wait till the budget. We'll start talking budget.
Do you need that final policy?
The education or diversity. Yes, we added educator diversity, and it's number 5.1042. You each received a copy of that, and I need to find mine too real quickly. So, all right, it's. I'll wait for you all to have it in front of you. Okay, and I'll agree with line 12. It says develop strategies that support educator diversity. I'm for supporting diversity, but I don't believe in going overboard and a lot of extra expense and choosing candidates over other qualified candidates, more qualified. So one thing that I thought under effective strategies, so number 17 says the most effective strategies. And then under that section, number 2, working with education preparation program leadership to identify any potential barriers to entry and/or program completion for minority educators, and to develop strategies to remove these barriers. And so one question I have is, I believe in supporting diversity, and I think it's, somewhat needed, but how are we removing barriers? What expense are we going to make sure that maybe some minorities get support and all, where Others may not. Mr. Brown, Dr. Brown, sorry. Could you answer that for me, please?
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, repeat the question. I was trying to synthesize what you were asking. but
Okay,
if you don't-
okay. Well, I believe in supporting educator diversity, and I think diversity is good. But I'm wondering to what expense or how extensive and, resources and all to identify barriers into any programs or educator programs, education preparation for minorities, and what strategies or expenses are we going to remove the barriers? So some may be getting extra resources from our system where others are not getting resources.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that clarity. Well, I will take you back to maybe line 4, where it says, educator diversity refers to the teaching workforce that reflects a broad range of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives, including but not limited to race, ethnicity, language, socioeconomic backgrounds, and pathways to professions. So from an HR standpoint, when we think about developing strategies to support educator diversity, we are thinking about all of that I just read out. But part of our LEAD program is that's a strategy in itself, right? When we think about our talent retention and culture initiatives, that is open for all of our staff members to ensure that our staff members is kind of retaining high quality staff, where we want to make sure we continue to develop our own teachers. But within that, we make sure that through communication, working with all of our groups, make sure they understand what's expected out of them, what's the process. If you recall, a couple days ago in your email, you received a communication about our LEAD program. Applications are open for aspiring teacher leader, aspiring instructional coach, aspiring assistant principals, as well as aspiring principals. So those strategies has really been very mindful that from an HR standpoint, I'm not waiting on schools to make sure they announce all those things to our staff members. We talk to our school administrators to make sure they're announcing it to all of our staff, but we also, from a district, we make sure we publicize, right? We make sure that all of our incoming applicants know that we are going to continue to help them grow as professionals. So that's just one strategy when you think that's not just touching some employees, but it's touching all employees. So it's going above and beyond to ensure that all of our staff members, and again, I'm going on the lens of just retention, right? And so that's multiple strategies. So when you think about costs, I think it's just incumbent on all of us to ensure that we have high quality teachers. We want to make sure we keep high quality teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's just more about how we go about doing business. And so I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I was trying to give you a real example of.
I think it's good that we're, promoting from within, and if we have wonderful educators of diverse backgrounds, that's wonderful to select them, a diverse amount from the pool that we have. But I was just wondering if are we financially, providing supports or removing barriers that way? I don't like the remove barriers, and I don't know if I'm alone. Mr. King?
Well, yeah, maybe you could give us an example of what are some potential barriers, or what are barriers that you've had to remove so that we can better understand it?
So
well,
can I give you a real example of,
Yeah.
we've got a partnership with Blue Cross, the Blue Sky Institute, and this is dealing with kids that are coming out of high school that are going to degree program that's 27 months through ETSU, but it's specifically looking at first gen college graduates, right? So it's specifically recruiting lower income students to ensure that they are graduating. What we've run into with that group of kids is a very small setback financially can cause a student to literally there was a kid in the first year that had a flat tire and almost withdrew from the program. So what Blue Cross did, and this is us, I'm on that advisory board to work with that group. We do help with them recruiting kids that are about to graduate. But what they did was through one of their foundations is put a fund together that is specifically for emergency needs of kids in that program. And so that's an example of like reducing a barrier. When I think about teachers, I think sometimes this gets caught up in just the noise of where we are currently. There's nothing behind this that is nuts. What I tell people all the time is if you look at the diversity, specifically what we're talking about here, or what I think we're beating around the bush around is you look at our black male students. We've probably somewhere around 12-13% of our student bodies are black males. When you look at the number of black male teachers we have, it's less than 3%, right? And so there's nothing that's lowering the bar to say that we're going to lower the bar to make sure we get more black male teachers, but we do need to be cognizant of that, because what we know is that the teachers that impacted me were teachers that I could relate to, that I can know. And I'm not saying that we can't relate to all kids, but there is something about seeing a teacher that looks like you in front of you. So what we have done is we have increased our efforts to go to HBCUs and to make sure that candidates that are coming out of those that are teachers of color or first-gen graduates themselves, that we have got eyes on them quickly to make sure we're recruiting them. But I think it says in here several times in all of these policies, they have to be qualified. They have to be highly effective. We're not lowering the bar for any of them.
Right. Well, and so you said something that reflects back to right before I left being administrator. When we started the Gestamp School, we started with a very successful program, and then and it wasn't from the school's perspective, but from the workforce perspective, they started putting a few restrictions, and we found that we had to start interviewing kids that had their own vehicles. So we had to restrict the number of kids that were going to apply to this school, because the workforce, the company themselves, wanted to make sure, because of attendance, that they had their own rides in case on days that school was out. And that's where we found it. Snow day hits, and they don't have a way to get to Gestamp. So then we had to start doing that. So that was a barrier that I saw, from me as the principal and working on that. But I was trying to picture how is that affecting teachers, and so I was wanting to see some examples.
Hey, would you allow me to give one more example? And
Sure.
I think this is one that, I think this is obvious. And again, I work alongside Dr. Stewart, and I give you an example of when we're thinking about an aspiring assistant principal or aspiring teacher leader, then they're on an assistant principal, they've met all the criteria, we've selected them. And then I think part of our structures and our systems is, quite frankly, if you're an African-American male, and then naturally sometimes people think that your best spot, your best location could be in one of our urban schools. Well, we recognize that might not be the case. If we want to make sure we're recruiting and we're retaining our effective educators, what we recognize is that we need to make sure, because we have limited number of our effective male teachers, is to how do we make sure that person is attached to a strong leader, right? So we spend time to ensure that we are placing our folks at the right place with the right leader, because that's what's going to grow them, right? And then many times that's making sure that we don't have things in our structure that we've got set up that we just naturally move people to different places because, one, we think that they've worked in an urban setting, that's their best fit, without talking to the educator. So I think we spend a lot of time making sure that we have the right people in the right chair. And so to me, that is a strategy. That takes time to make sure that we figure out, okay, what skill set do they bring to the table? Where are they strong? What do they need some more development? So it's all about making sure that, and that's just not for our diverse candidate, that's for all candidates, right? But that has been very specific to make sure that when we place individuals, we're placing individuals to be successful, because we know if they're successful, then our kids are going to be successful. So I say that's just looking at our internal processes and making sure that we're setting our educators up for success. And I think that is, hopefully you can, that makes sense to you in a sense.
And that's not costing us anything.
Yes, sir.
Right, and that all makes sense, and that all supports diversity. And I guess it's just the remove barriers part, but Mr. Groen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, this is my personal opinion. I don't think I'm alone in this opinion. But if we're truly honoring what is the moral right thing to do and following federal law, we're not supposed to discriminate on race, ethnicity, language, socioeconomic backgrounds, gender, sex, anything. I don't think we need this policy. We're going to be looking for the best candidate. So when you introduce something like this, it says you're going to put extra emphasis. That automatically defers discrimination. So I just don't agree with this. I agree with the concept of it. But if we're going to, this is everywhere in our state constitution. It's law by Supreme Court. You know, the 3 Supreme Court decisions that were put out in May of 2020 speaks to this also. We shouldn't have to have this policy at all. We've gotten rid of DEI or DIE, whichever one you want to put on it. So what is the point here? I'm just from that legal perspective at the national and state level, why do we need to delineate this?
And I'll say, we already have supports diversity in another personnel policy that we already did, but, you know, whether we keep the policy or not, I feel strongly about at least rewording it. So we could even, you know, maybe in the December meeting or make it first read. I don't know how you eliminate a policy, or I would like the strategies of removing barriers and, you know, some strategies. I think we should just leave it as,
Well, personally, I think, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt. I think this is a racist policy. And I can argue it from both sides.
and see, I think hiring the best person, and it might be a person of color, you know, that might be the best person. And I know we have some of the best educators I've known have been, you know, people of color, and they still are excellent. So I think, you know, we still get a variety. We have a diverse group, and sometimes, you know, someone of color in certain situations. And I think, honestly, in my experience, it helps to have people of color in the more, you know, suburban schools. It's helpful, but as far as going that, it just seems like the extra mile as far as strategies and removing barriers. I think we, you know, work with our educators that we have like we do everyone else, and we promote them all, the diverse pool, into our lead programs. And out of that pool, we do end up with a diverse group because we're doing a good job and promoting a diverse amount of people. So, you know, what other strategies do we need?
So I want to
And-
point out to Mr. Groen's,
Okay.
you know, comment, lines 33 and 34. Even in the changing landscape, it's recognizing that anything that we do will follow federal, state law as applicable. What I think is important here is what we're signaling to a district that's made up of 54% of its kids are either black or Latino. And that is a very diverse district. And right now, our educator force is nowhere close to matching that demographic. And I think what the policy does is it shows effort on the part of the board and the administration to hire and recruit without lowering a standard. Again, I think it's very important that we emphasize that point. We're not lowering a standard, but we're saying that we are going to be intentional about trying to recruit teachers that reflect the demographics of our students. And again, this isn't just about race. This is also thinking about socioeconomic and looking at kids that are living in poverty and trying to recruit teachers that were first-gen students so they can set an example and mentor. And so I think before we go too fast with this, we need to think about what it's signaling and the intent, and that it is still going to follow even the changing federal landscape.
Yeah, and my question, well.
I'd
I'll
like to
just let-
comment to that,
it's-
please.
It's Ms. Black's turn.
Okay.
Honestly, that's a lot about what I wanted to clarify is that having a policy that says that we're going to be intentional to recruit a diverse workforce doesn't give priority to anyone. We're still going to hold high standards about who we hire, and you know, all of the things that we expect from our staff at every level. They're all going to be kept to the same standard as far as effectiveness and quality, but just saying we're going to be intentional about searching out and making sure that we have diverse staff in every school, which I think, honestly, I don't see anything wrong with having a policy that states this intention. And intention is exactly what came to my mind through this discussion, is that we're just saying that we're going to be intentional about making sure that we have diverse staff to serve our diverse student population. You know, as a social worker, I learned about cultural competency on a level that there's just a level of understanding, and that cultural competence is part of what can qualify an educator to be in a certain environment. And it is an important qualification in some places. And it's something that can be considered and should be. But ultimately, having a policy that says that we're going to be intentional about making sure that our workforce is diverse I don't see it as being a bad thing. I see it as like us just stating that this is a value that we have, and making sure that our students are served by a diverse staff at every level.
Thank you. Ms. Schaefer?
Piggybacking on the word intention. We don't have to have this policy. I don't have a problem having this policy, but what I'm seeing in multiple policies tonight is this continued intention, and what I've heard some concerns that have come to me with some trainings regarding this, some senior leadership trainings. I'll just say what's been told to me is concerns that Dr. Stewart has said, are you racist or are you not? It's this intention of what are we trying to get at? And that's the concerns that have been brought to me, is even in senior leadership trainings, that's what they've been asked to say, whether they're racist or they're not. And that's alarming.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. I've been in all the senior leadership team meetings, and I've never been a part of a meeting that said that.
I was not
so
there.
it's
All I can state is
categorically-
what was brought to me.
Yeah, I'll state publicly that's categorically false.
Okay. Mr. Groen?
Well, let me just say that I had to pay for all my own college. You know, my dad died when I was 19, my third semester of college, and I had to pay for my own schooling. I didn't get any extra support. And to me, based upon this, it looks like I wouldn't get any support because, you know, you're looking at something other than. If we want the most qualified, there's going to be something that separates the most qualified. It doesn't have anything to do with diversity. I mean, do we want a diverse teaching force? Well, absolutely we do. And I don't believe I'm all that unique in how I grew up, but yeah, I grew up for 9 years as a minority in my neighborhood and my schools. And I mean a big minority, not little. And anybody who's, in the last 3.5 years or 4 that have listened to me speak on this at this board knows that background. So,
Okay,
Okay.
I need, yes, Dr. Brown.
Just as your chief talent officer, I have to say this. If we have 3,500 teachers, let's just say that, we need to ask ourselves, why is it we only have less than 10% or maybe 10% of teachers of color? Now, I'd say that at the end of the day, it's our job, it's my job to ensure that we have the high-quality teachers in all of our classroom, regardless of the race. But we have to ask ourselves, if we have 3,500 teachers and 10% are teachers of color, to me, I'm going to do everything I possibly can, our staff's going to do everything I possibly can to maintain, when I think about retaining our teachers of color, we're going to do that. Every day when we lose 1 or 2 teachers, a teacher of color to a private school, things like that, I have to ask myself, what's happened, what's going on, are we not supporting the staff? But we do that for all staff members. So, Mr. Groen, I hear you and I understand, but I just want to know, I wrestle with that, right? I just want you to know, I wrestle with having 3,500 teachers, and then I struggle to maintain a 10% workforce that's of color. And so that's just me honestly speaking. And so I have to say strategies are needed if we want to make sure we have a high quality and a diverse workforce. But again, the will of the board, policy or no policy, I will continue to do all I can to attract the best people for our kids here in Hamilton County. But again, please ask yourself, 10%. And it's been like that for years.
and I've already spoken on why that happens.
Okay, apologize, but this meeting needs to come to a close. I'm sorry, I have another engagement. Dr. Brown, I do truly appreciate all the work you do, and we can just postpone this. I'm glad to be able to discuss it, and to me, the only problem I had is just, removing barriers, but developing strategies, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work you do. So, at this point, Jody Schaefer will take over for the legislative part of this meeting. Thank you so much.
Does anyone need a brief break? Okay, let's take a brief recess, 10 minutes. back started on this last section, so I know everybody can get caught up and get home in a decent hour. So the first thing you have that was passed out was the TSBA 2026 legislative agenda for those that weren't at the delegation. So this shows you everything that passed in the delegation at the TSBA convention. And so this is their legislative agenda. And then we have ours for review. And the TSBA's is a little bit more specific to certain bills, and ours is a little bit more general. So we're going to let you walk us through ours. And if you want to compare to the TSBA, you can and refer to what bills they're specifically getting at. But ours is more general.
Great. Okay. So you should have each of those, and I will point you to a couple places on the TSBA agenda where we have some overlap. The first section on ours is a section around TISA funding. And if it's helpful to note, what we'll probably do on the final draft that you all approve is we'll provide additional detail on all of these TISA components so that if you want to use this document as you're talking to legislators, you have some of that detail available to you. But if you have questions about anything that's included here, we can talk about them tonight. Okay, so the first thing we did is, of course, this is a TISA review year. We're only in our third year of TISA implementation, third year. So we've learned a lot and have some guidance and feedback for the state legislature around how they could improve the TISA funding model. So number one is an annual inflationary adjustment. Number two is adding a correction to how they're getting an in count for economically disadvantaged students. We added in sustainable provisions for school infrastructure, considerations for unfunded mandates, special education pre-K, tutoring in 4th and 5th grade, summer learning programs, and CTE, and then increased weighting for students with characteristics of dyslexia and ULN 9 and ULN 10 students. So just a quick overview on this. Inflationary adjustment was something that was included in BEP, but they did not translate over to TISA, so there's a pretty big push across the state right now to go back and include inflation in TISA. Economically disadvantaged in count is a change that happened when we moved to direct certification in 2016 in school districts across the state because they aren't including the same number of programs that they previously included, or they're not basing it on free and reduced lunch anymore. We're seeing a significantly smaller number of students being coded as economically disadvantaged, even though we have a higher number of students with verified economic need through free and reduced lunch. So there's a push to correct that. You all know sustainable school infrastructure funding is definitely a need. It's not currently really included in TISA. Special ed pre-K, tutoring in 4th and 5th, summer learning programs, and CTE are all just places where we're not receiving funding for things that are mandated by the state or aren't receiving as many dollars as it costs us to implement. And then ULN 9 and ULN 10 students are our students who have the highest level of need in special education and exceptional education. So these are our students who might be receiving 23 hours of service or more. They might even be receiving residential services. They cost us anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000 to serve really well on those ULN 10 side, and we're only getting around $11,000 in funding for them right now. So a push to increase the weighting there. So that's that top section. The other thing you have in TISA funding is a non-statement around the Education Freedom Scholarship Program's existence, but rather as the state considers the possibility of increasing the allocation towards that program, that we would like to see a push to increase the funding for public education at the same rate, right? So if you increase funding for the Education Freedom Scholarship Program by 30%, right, that same consideration should be made for public education dollars.
Is there anyone that has any comments around that legislative item for TISA funding?
Okay.
Jody, I'm sorry. This one is.
That's ours, and that's the one, the TSBA. So ours is more general. Theirs is linked to specific bills.
Yeah. So what TSBA does, if I can help you there a little bit, each of those specific sections, ultimately, what Nolan at TSBA is really great at is identifying specific pieces of legislation that he knows are coming through the pipeline, or that he knows are being proposed. What you all voted on at TSBA are whether or not to support those individual pieces of legislation. So that's specifically what's on their legislative agenda. The approach that we tend to take is trying to find these larger buckets so that you all can have a discussion about it, say yes or no to whether or not you generally support that direction for that bucket. And then as things come up throughout the legislative cycle, you can advocate in different ways depending on what comes through.
Your question, Jody, was what? I'm sorry.
Is there any comment about this? I see Gary. Does any board member have comments about this being one of our agenda items to talk to our legislators about, is increasing TISA funding? Gary?
And I'm aware the special ed pre-K is on the floor coming up for the legislator. Also, summer learning programs, I know they have something there. Is there anything that you all are aware of? I have not seen anything on added funds for 4th, 5th grade tutoring as far as, and
The commissioner made a statement, but go ahead.
Recognized, sorry.
Yes. Mr. Connor?
There has been some discussion, and there was an attempt to add an amendment last cycle to a bill in order to increase because of the 3rd grade retention laws.
Right.
So there was the idea of continuing supports. At current, anything has been either tabled or voted down.
All
But
right, so-
it is definitely a conversation piece that's been there.
but do you know if it's, I know there's actually a proposition to provide funding for summer learning programs
Yes.
and also for exceptional ed pre-K. Both of those are on the floor to be thing. Has anybody written any up for tutoring?
I haven't seen any new ones yet. Now, and please don't let me take any thunder, but anything that was discussed, since this is still the 114th, anything that was discussed in the last one that wasn't actually voted on can be brought back up. So some of those amendments could be brought back up. They're just not currently tied to new legislation.
I would say the other thing is that we hope that we can use this to help drive legislation as well. So if there isn't one, that there can be discussions that are had to help push legislators to introduce legislation
Okay.
or add to existing.
And my next question probably doesn't fall in this, but I know with us adding the aviation program at Harrison Bay, they were looking at adopting an aviation technology or technician or aviation mechanic program. And I was just curious if the state has made any progress toward that.
Oh, that's a good question. We can find out for you.
Okay.
But that,
It's supposed,
yeah.
it's under CT, and it's supposed to, if they're going to adopt it, it's supposed to happen in April, May.
Okay.
Tullahoma High School's presenting it, and I didn't know if there's been, okay.
We can find out.
Anyone else? Okay, let's move on to number 2 on our agenda.
So this comes from some discussions that happened last year in the state legislature around local school financing, and just a couple of places that we know are going to come back up again this year. One is maintenance of effort. So last year, the discussion that was had in the at the state legislature level was a requirement that when county commissions or local funding bodies of any kind make a commitment to a school district at a certain level, that if revenue doesn't come in at the level that they put on paper, that they would then be required to be the ones to make up that gap, as opposed to right now the burden falling on the school district when revenue doesn't come in at that same level. So we know that that's going to come up again, and this is also a place where you'll see overlap on the TSBA legislative agenda. They will be supporting and advocating for the maintenance of effort legislation. And then the second piece of this is support for the creation of a capital projects trust fund, which was, that one's fairly straightforward. It was a piece of legislation last year that we believe will come up again this year and is also on TSBA's.
Any comments? All right, let's move on to number 3.
So our third section here is school safety measures. This is super similar to a section that was on your legislative agenda last year. The top part is around a push for the state to allow school districts to draw down funds that are currently earmarked specifically for school resource officers. In Hamilton County, we have school resource officers through a partnership with the sheriff's office as well as a couple of other local law enforcement agencies. And they're able to draw down funds for those from the state because the state has provided enough funding for a school resource officer for every school in the district across the state. However, we have a challenge in larger school districts that a lot of small school districts don't experience, which is that there aren't enough deputies to be able to hire. We have a little bit of an easier time hiring SSOs because it's a better, it's a better gig, right? They get a better schedule. They might get to work in the school that their students are at, right? The same reason people might want to be teachers or might want to be a school nurse. So what we're really pushing for is that the state can implement some guardrails around what expectations are for SSOs, and that school districts have partnerships with their local law enforcement agencies, and that by doing that, we could then have access to those SRO funds. So we've had a couple of conversations about this already with the governor's office, and of course, have included the county, the mayor's office, and the sheriff's office in those discussions, and it's been excellent so far, but we would like to see a further push. The second section of this is just around some general supports for health and safety for students. So there will be a push for more funding for school nurses. That's some overlap with your TSBA agenda. Counselors, social workers, and school-based behavioral health professionals are all pieces that were on last year's legislative agenda and we believe are still incredibly important for school safety and health and well-being for students. And then some of those school safety systems and enhancements that we're seeing support for across the state that we're interested in as well. So weapons detection devices and software, transportation safety technology, and then other tools that might be able to go support student safety.
Are we trying to hire more SSOs than using the SROs, though? That's what I don't want to get
great
into
question.
here.
No. So what we've kind of talked with the folks at the state level about is that you should always be prioritizing hiring an SRO, and you would have to have the SRO basically sign off on saying, yes, like we've hit our max capacity before the district could draw down those funds.
I just want to protect that relationship.
We agree.
Anyone else have any comments? Okay, number 4.
This one I might ask Zach to help with a little bit. But we, of course, are always looking for ways to improve teacher licensure and educator pipelines to kind of give our HR department more levers to pull down. We know there's going to be discussions about this across the state this year in terms of how to start beating the, or how to start impacting rather, because I don't think we'll be able to beat it, but the pipeline challenges that are coming across the state. So we've included a few different strategies that we support. Number one is improving reciprocity. So the conversation that Ms. Schaefer and I had is, this is similar to the bar exam, right? As you move across state lines, needing to obtain new licensure when you move. Tennessee has one of the strictest reciprocity laws, correct? Yes. So it's really challenging for us to hire folks who are coming in from out of state, even though they're qualified and we're excellent educators in the states that they came to us from. So removing that praxis requirement just for those who are renewing or advancing practitioner licenses that were previously obtained out of state. The second piece here is reviewing the practice score thresholds in high need content areas. We've listed some of those out. So I want to be super clear here. This is not necessarily an endorsement of reducing thresholds, but is rather just a request for the state to start reviewing those. One example that we have is in math. So really few math teachers are expected to teach beyond pre-calculus, right? But the praxis score includes a high degree of calculus. You might have someone who would be an excellent 6th through 10th grade math teacher who isn't going to teach calculus but is being held to that praxis score threshold. So is there a place where we could start to review that to increase some flexibility so that we can make it a little bit easier to fill the pipeline on some of those hard to staff positions? The last piece in that top section is around increasing flexibility to reduce shortages and key endorsements bound by grade bands, and this is the one that I might need help explaining from Zach. The last piece of that, increasing licensure flexibility to reduce shortages in key endorsements bound by grade bands.
So, give you an example. Right now, in the state, there's several categories. You have K3, K5, K8, and so I think it's one of those where we'll love for the state to look at, why do we have what are they looking at when they say K3, K4, K5? When I was coming up through school, whatnot, it was a K8, K12, right? And so now we've divided everything up, and so what's happened is if I need a fourth grade teacher, whatnot, and but I've got certifications in K3, there's a lot of things you have to do to figure out, move your schedule around, or to put a teacher on a waiver or a permit, whereas just looking at elementary, give a little more flexibility how we can be creative with the staff we have. And going back even on the situation about the teachers that's licensed in another state, ideally what we typically have to do with that individual is we have to get them through put them on a permit, whatnot. But it's not just the permit that's an issue. It's number one, they're coming into our state, they want to be a teacher, we want to hire them, they're already certified in their mind, but not only do we have to go through the paperwork to get them a permit and they start working, but then they got to do all these other things. So it becomes, we might get them from year one, but then they've got to do all this work to get to year two to get a license they felt they already have achieved. So I just wanted to get a little more.
And those are state law requirements in terms of that process to get them from, like if they come from Georgia, that's not a Hamilton County Department of Education policy.
It's a state policy, and it's all about the status of their license in another state. So I would tell you, if their license is still active, then it's definitely an easier road. But if there's an educator that maybe they haven't taught in the last 3 or 4 years and their license is inactive, right? And so activating that license becomes the issue, right? But they left in great standing. Just people decide to change profession. They decide they want to come back. Still qualified, still meet all the criteria. But because there was an inactive license, we have, when I say we, the state, we've got a laundry list of things that's got to occur for the educator to be in, to get back to a professional status. Exactly. So there you go. On top of, to a point that we don't reimburse, and so they have to, on top of dealing with what we're offering as a salary, but hey, by the way, make sure you allocate about, if you got to take 3 exams, $1,000 really to get
more than $450 each now.
Reciprocity is expensive in any
Yes, ma'am.
profession. Okay, number 5, state testing.
Yep. Okay, so this one, of course, we've had this discussion here a lot already, but we believe that if we really want to be able to impact the number of tests that students are being asked to take currently, that we need to advocate for some flexibility there at the state level, especially around screeners in K8 and EOCs in 912, so that districts have some space to determine their own best method of formative assessments. So pretty straightforward, but have included it here.
That goes to the reducing testing. So if something like that was to pass, then we could decide ourselves what is the better test, so they're not having multiple tests.
Yeah, I think, like, specifically, you think about K through 5, runs that screen kids 3 times a year, regardless of, what they scored on last year's TCAP. So it's, if we really want to reduce the amount of testing, we've got to have some flexibility with the state on looking at that. We're not saying, certainly don't take all testing away, but, be able to look at it more constructively per kid and where we should need it or we don't need it.
Mr. Daughtery?
Dr. Robertson, question for you. When was the last time the state of Tennessee adjusted any of their required testing frequencies? I won't hold you to it. With the addition of them, or okay? So we've only gone up.
Yes.
They've never gone back.
Now, we cut chemistry. Now, it wasn't officially tested yet. They did it as 2 years of baseline, and then when it was time to test, they decided not to test.
We also added work history.
Yeah. Oh, that's true.
English students.
Yeah.
Just curious.
But overall, it's either remained steady or it's increased.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Number 6.
So in this section, we know that there's going to be a discussion. TDOE has applied for or will be applying for a waiver on federal accountability. So our push here is to see that that does not jeopardize the overall amount of available federal education funding that we're receiving currently. And then depending on what the response to that is, we do somewhat expect that what happens from that is that we receive, or the state receives, block grants from the Federal Department of Education. So what we would like to see a push for here is that the way that the state distributes those block grants to districts is aligned to the TISA funding formula so that it follows enrollment and student need.
Can you give an example of what that would look like?
Oh.
I think I know what you're saying.
So for example, there's a lot of rumors about, like, let's take Title II, for example. So Title II is mainly used for teacher prep, teacher, professional learning. Let's say the federal government did away with Title II, took that money and sent it in a block grant to Tennessee. What we're advocating for is that if that happens, that they disperse it in a similar formula to what they're doing with TISA. And so it kind of protects. Oftentimes when that happens, our state is run at times by very small rural areas that can see an oversized benefit from something like that. So we're saying if that happens, follow guidelines you set in TISA to disperse that money. So looking at student counts, the needs of students, so on and so forth, instead of just saying we're going to send X number of dollars to every county in the state.
So theoretically, there could be an increase in funding.
I don't think it would be the other way.
We just don't want to decrease by smaller counties getting a bigger chunk.
Because there's many more smaller counties that get to vote on it than larger counties, and the smaller counties get the same piece of the pie, but they have
Less students.
10 times less students with that piece of pie.
Number 7.
Okay, and then this piece is just to actually go towards things that we've heard you all advocate for individually. So these sometimes get brought up into individual bills or wrapped into other bills. So what we've included here that we've heard from you all are support for early childhood learning, access to athletics and extracurricular activities, full service community schools, school-based nurse practitioners, expanded broadband, and free school meals. So these are all just things that we know support the work of public education, and that you all have included in some of the pieces that you've advocated for, so would also like to be able to advocate for them at the state level.
Does anyone have any comments, or is there a piece on the TSBA agenda that we didn't put on our agenda that anyone's wanting to discuss or add? Ours is not as long, and ours is more general. But nope, this will come up for a vote. We have to vote on it. So if something comes up between now and when we vote and you want it to be added, please reach out so that we can discuss it. Okay, with nothing else. Oh, one more thing. So we're going to move on to the last thing on the agenda, and that's our contract with Gowan, and Dr. Robertson's going to discuss this proposal.
So, board for a number of years has been part of large district coalition called CLASS that used to include Knoxville, Metro Nashville, Shelby County. Knoxville dropped out of CLASS about a year ago. We've had this discussion, had it last year, about whether or not that still makes sense for us to be a part of. In conversations with Ms. Schaefer and Robert Gowan, we were going to recommend that we drop out of CLASS and that we engage in a specific contract with Robert Gowan to support us at the state level. Contract that we're bringing is a little bit less than what we were paying to be in CLASS, and it runs from January 1st until June 30th of this year, so it kind of gives us a 6-month runway to see if this is a better situation. If it's not, we can
Mr. Connor?
Thank you, Chair. I want to pick up right where he left off and say that with class being a little bit different, it achieved its goal. Everybody that got into class got into it because of something we just discussed. The BEP was not serving the larger school districts the way that it should. It was much more serving the rural counties and doing a disservice to where more people live. And so through Robert's efforts, that is why the TISA happened. He's one of many people that helped to make that happen. So to be really clear, like, yes, I completely agree with this. I think that he does great work for us tirelessly. But class was not a failure. We won a great battle for our school system because of that. So I just want to make sure that's on the record. And then I'll be supporting this because I know that from those efforts and the efforts that continue, he'll show us that he's the right man for the job.
I would like to meet him.
He said he's open to coming here, and of course, when we go to Nashville, you'll meet him there as well. But he's open to coming here and doing either a little session or just a presentation to the board.
I think that would be great since we're going to have a one-on-one contract with him for the whole board to get to know him.
Steve wants to arm wrestle him too. So.
Okay. Ms. Black?
All I was going to say is I like the idea of adjusting our contract to be one-on-one and to give us this period to get us through this next legislative session, right, from, January to June. It gets us through this next round of legislative session to give us an idea of what we would get.
Mr. King?
And if I'm not mistaken, we were paying $5,000 per month, correct?
Yes, sir.
And this will be $3,500, so that's a good way to go.
Small little bit of savings. We may put those towards coaches. All right. Anybody else have any comments? All right.